Your life was written before your birth, and it's still being written right now, by fate or chance, but by a field of consciousness so vast, so ancient, that it remembers everything your soul has ever done, felt, or dreamed. There's a place, though calling it a place is limiting, that holds every thought, every intention, every karmic imprint of every soul that has ever lived. A field so silent that most never hear it, so subtle that most never sense it. Yet, it is always there, just beyond the veil of ordinary awareness. You've felt it before, perhaps in the stillness of meditation, in the strange clarity of Dasya, Vu, or in dreams that feel more real than waking life. The ancients knew it as a mystics understood it through intuition. Today, we call it the Akashic Records. But make no mistake, this isn't some modern fantasy. It is the very blueprint behind your reality, and once you glimpse it, you will never see yourself the same way again. There's a reason you sometimes feel as if your life is part of a story. You don't fully understand, like you've been dropped into the middle of a book with no memory of the pages that came before. That feeling isn't imagination, it's intuition. Deep inside, you know your soul has lived far more than this single life. You know there's a record of those lives, and that they didn't vanish when you were born into this one. That record has a name. It has been whispered across time, across continents, and across traditions, the Akashic Records. But the Akashic Records are not a book. They are not physical. They're not hidden in some ancient library or buried beneath the earth. They exist in a dimension beyond time, beyond space, an invisible field of consciousness, a spiritual database. Imagine a vibrational archive that stores not only your actions, but your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions, every decision you've ever made, every lesson you've been meant to learn, every lifetime you've lived, and not just yours, but every soul's, every experience. This isn't just a concept for the chosen few. This is the terrain of consciousness itself. Akasha comes from the Sanskrit word Akasha, meaning ether or spirit, the fifth element in ancient Indian cosmology, beyond earth, water, fire, and air. It represents the subtle energetic substance from which all things emerge. To the ancients, Akasha was not a poetic idea. It was the invisible thread connecting all of existence, the field through which divine intelligence expresses itself. And the Akashic Records are what that field remembers. This isn't some niche corner of metaphysics. Versions of this idea exist in almost every mystical tradition. The Hebrews spoke of the Book of Life. The ancient Egyptians believed in the Hall of Records. In Islam, there's the Al-Ad al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet that records all things. And in modern Western esotericism, thinkers like Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner wrote extensively of a spiritual memory field that transcends the limits of our senses. They weren't inventing it. They were remembering it. If you've ever wondered why some people seem born with a kind of wisdom, or why you've experienced unexplained fears, uncanny abilities, or deep emotional reactions that feel far older than this life, you're not crazy. You're sensing echoes from the Akashic Records. You are more than your current circumstances. You are a soul carrying layers of experience, and those layers aren't random. They're patterns, part of a larger curriculum your soul agreed to explore. But until you become aware of those patterns, they keep playing out unconsciously, lifetime after lifetime. And this is where the Akashic Records become more than a concept. They become a key, a map, a compass pointing you back to yourself, because within them lie answers, not just about who you were, but about who you're becoming. There are insights waiting to be heard, lessons waiting to be integrated, and a truth most never approach. Your purpose is not something you invent, it's something you remember. Some truths can't be shared here, but they're too important to hide. Sign up to Insights Academy through the link in the description and receive a free digital copy of the Kabbalion while it's still available. Because here's what they won't tell you. The Akashic Records aren't off, they're just off radar. Most people never even try to access them, not because they're incapable, but because they were never told it was possible. They were taught that knowledge lives in books, that authority lives in institutions, and that answers must come from outside. But the Akashic records say otherwise. They say the highest knowledge isn't learned, it's recalled. You don't need to be a guru or a psychic to access this wisdom. You just need to get quiet enough to hear what's been echoing inside you all along. The Akashic field doesn't favor the elite. It responds to intention, to sincerity, to readiness. So the question isn't, can you access the records? The question is, what happens when you do? Long before the term Akashic Records was ever coined, there were those who knew not in theory, but through direct experience. Visionaries, mystics, seers, and sages who touched something beyond the veil and brought back messages written not in ink, but in light. They didn't call it a record because what they encountered wasn't language, it was truth in its purest, most vibrational form, across continents and cultures. They whispered about a place, if you could even call it a place, where the memories of the soul were kept, guarded not by walls, but by frequency. And those who reached it didn't read it with their eyes, they felt it in their bone. The Vedic rishis of ancient India spoke of Akasha as the primal substance of all reality, the origin of all form and all thought. In their worldview, nothing was ever truly lost. It simply returned to Akasha, like a ripple folding back into the ocean. Tibetan mystics referred to this same field as the mind stream, a flow of consciousness that transcends individual lifetimes. The Druids, the Egyptians, the Gnostics, the Mayans, they all had their own names for it. Different languages, different symbols, but the same knowing. There exists an invisible domain which remembers everything. So, what happened to this knowledge? It didn't disappear. It was dismantled, marginalized, rebranded as superstition by institutions that feared its implications. Because if the soul has memory, then the self is not defined by nationality, religion, or even biology. If the records are real, then authority must be internal, not imposed, and that's a dangerous idea to systems built on control. During colonization, many indigenous cultures with oral traditions of soul memory were forcibly silenced. Sacred ceremonies that opened intuitive channels to Akasha were outlawed, mocked, or replaced. The burning of ancient libraries, the demonization of pagan practices, the rewriting of spiritual history, it was all part of the same effort to sever the connection between human beings and the knowledge that exists beyond the five senses. Even today, in the age of rationalism, the idea of the Akashic records is often dismissed as pseudoscience or fantasy. Yet those same critics can't explain why children remember past lives, why people who've never met can share the same dream, or why ancient texts across civilizations describe identical experiences of soul memory with uncanny precision. It's not that the evidence doesn't exist, it's that it doesn't fit the narrative. Because a society built on consumption and obedience can't function if its people start asking, who was I before this? And what if the story I was told isn't the full story? So instead, you were given a new story, one that told you you are your name, your job, your race, your gender. Your past begins with your birth certificate and ends with your death certificate. Everything else is fairy tales. But beneath that story, the older one has quietly waited, the one encoded in dreams you couldn't explain, whispered during moments of silence when the noise of the world fades, and you can finally hear your own knowing. This isn't about replacing religion, proving a point, or claiming secret knowledge. It's about remembrance. It's about reclaiming a truth that was taken not by violence alone, but by ridicule, distraction, and forgetting. The Akashic records are not new. They are ancient, beyond comprehension. What's new is that more people are waking up to them again, and maybe that's why you're here, not to learn something brand new, but to remember something timeless. Something your ancestors once knew before it was torn from their tongues. Something your soul has been trying to show you all along. Because when you realize that history isn't just written in books, but in energy, in frequency, in you begin to reclaim the story no one else can write for you. Bones. When you access the Akashic records, it's not just about remembering who you were, it's about reconnecting with who you came here to be. This kind of memory isn't passive. It moves you. It changes the way you walk through life, reshapes how you face challenges, and alters how you perceive others and tell your story. Once you stand in the presence of the infinite and witness your place within it, nothing can make you feel small, broken, or powerless again. You didn't come to this world empty. You didn't arrive as a blank slate, randomly cast into a chaotic existence. You came with a blueprint, a soul-level design shaped by lifetimes of experience, intention, and consequence. The Akashic records hold that blueprint. They don't just store the information about who you've been. They map out the energetic residue of those experiences. Some call it karma, others refer to it as soul memory. But at its core, it's the spiritual architecture of your evolution. Karma has often been misunderstood. It's not a punishment or cosmic retribution. Karma is memory, it's momentum, it's energy echoing forward, seeking balance, resolution, and growth. Think of it like an unfinished chord that needs completion. If you betrayed someone in a past life, you might feel a deep need to protect others in this one. If you suppressed your truth, you may now feel an intense pull to speak, even if your voice trembles. These aren't random traits. They are emotional and energetic threads woven through lifetimes, creating continuity in your soul's story. Then, there are soul contracts. These aren't rigid scripts. They are agreements made at the soul level before incarnation, arrangements to meet certain people, face specific challenges, or experience particular lessons. That toxic relationship, the difficult parent, the mentor who appeared at the right moment, these aren't accidents. They may be part of a deeper soul contract, a mutual agreement meant to catalyze growth. The Akashic records allow us to glimpse these contracts, not to escape pain, but to understand its purpose. When you access the records, you begin to see your struggles differently. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You notice the repeating cycles, the same heartbreak, the same fear, the same self-sabotage. And once you recognize the pattern, you gain the power to rewrite it. Awareness breaks the cycle, and conscious choice becomes the seed of transformation. The records also offer something sacred, the ability to see your gifts through a new lens. While many focus on wounds, wisdom, talents, strengths, and even spiritual abilities can also travel across lifetimes. That inexplicable pull to heal, teach, or create might not be new. It may be a gift your soul has been honing for lifetimes, and the records help you remember where your power lives, not just where your pain started. Understanding your soul's blueprint also dissolves comparison. When you realize everyone is on a unique evolutionary path, you no longer feel the need to match someone else's timeline. You begin to honor your own process. You stop rushing, stop blaming, and start trusting that your challenges aren't obstacles. They're activations. The Akashic records reveal your soul's curriculum, and once you see that, even the hardest setbacks begin to feel like sacred assignments. But perhaps the most liberating truth is this: your blueprint is fluid. The past shapes the present, but it doesn't trap it. Karma is not a life sentence. Soul contracts can be rewritten. Patterns can be broken. The Akashic records don't chain you to a fate. They offer a map, but you still choose the path. In every moment, you're either repeating an old pattern or creating a new cycle entirely. When you ask, "What is my purpose?" the answer isn't something that will descend from the sky. It's an invitation to remember what your soul already knows. Your blueprint has always been within you. The records are simply the key to unlocking it. For many, the Akashic records sound poetic at best, a metaphor for mystics and those who believe in something more. But what if it's not just a metaphor? What if what ancient sages described as a spiritual library is something modern science is just beginning to understand? Energy fields, quantum theory, and studies on consciousness challenge everything we thought we knew about reality. The reason mainstream science has largely ignored the Akashic records is that they don't fit neatly into the materialist worldview. You can't put the records under a microscope or measure them with a ruler, but neither can you measure consciousness, thoughts, dreams, or memories. And yet, we know they exist. The records may not be physical, but neither is the internet signal that allows you to read these words right now. Just because something is unseen doesn't mean it's unreal. Physicists have long known that reality isn't as solid as it appears. At the quantum level, everything is energy, interconnected, dynamic, and vibrating. What we perceive as form is just a dense arrangement of frequencies. Information, it turns out, may be the very foundation of the universe, not matter or even energy. And this is where the idea of a universal information field becomes more than just mysticism. It's becoming a viable model for reality. Ervin Laszlo, a systems philosopher and Nobel Peace Prize nominee, introduced the idea of the Akashic field. According to his theory, the universe isn't a random accident. It's a coherent system, driven by information stored in the Akashic field. Laszlo didn't pull this from ancient texts. He saw parallels between cutting-edge physics and timeless spiritual wisdom. For him, the Akashic records weren't fantasy. They were a scientific inevitability waiting to be understood. The holographic universe theory, proposed by scientists like David Bohm and Karl Pribram, suggests that the universe functions like a hologram. Every part contains the whole. That means all information is encoded everywhere, all the time. Every cell in your body holds your entire genetic code. Every point in the field could hold the memory of every moment, every life, every possibility. Sound familiar? These theories don't prove the Akashic records in the traditional sense, but they do open the door. They challenge the notion that we are isolated, separate beings in a mechanical universe. Instead, they point to a universe woven with intelligence, memory, and interconnection, a field that remembers, a cosmos that knows itself through you. Even near-death experiences, once dismissed as hallucinations, now offer clues. Many who have returned describe a realm where their entire life unfolded before them, not in judgment, but in understanding. Some see not just their own life, but the impact of their actions on others, rippling out like echoes. That panoramic perspective is consistent with what spiritual practitioners experience when accessing the Akashic records. And then there's intuition. How does a mother sense her child is in danger, miles away? How do some people just know when something isn't right before it happens? These phenomena suggest we're connected to a larger field of information, something we're not fully aware of. What if, instead of tapping into guesses, we're tapping into memory? The Akashic records don't ask you to believe in something new. They ask you to remember something ancient. They invite you to consider that the universe is not random, but conscious and intentional. Your thoughts, choices, and essence are not fleeting moments lost to time. They're part of a living record that holds everything science hasn't caught up yet, but it's getting closer. And when the gap between science and spirit finally closes, we may discover that the greatest truths were never hidden. We simply stopped looking in the right place. From the moment you were born, the world began telling you who you are. Not with curiosity, but with certainty. It gave you a name, a nationality, a religion, a set of beliefs, and a long list of rules. It taught you what was real and what wasn't, what was dangerous to even consider. And somewhere in that long list of silent agreements, it slipped in one message. Forget. Forget who you are. Forget what you've lived. Forget where you came from. Forget what you know. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't an unfortunate side effect of growing up in the modern world. It was part of a system built to sever your connection to what makes you powerful, what makes you sovereign, to the memory of your soul. Because someone who remembers who they are cannot be controlled. And control is the currency of the world we live in. So instead of wonder, you were given obedience. Instead of intuition, repetition. Instead of soul work, schoolwork. You were taught to look outward for answers and mistrust anything that came from within. If you had visions, you were called imaginative. If you had past life memories, you were told it was fantasy. If you felt deeply connected to things you couldn't explain, you were told to forget. This is why the Akashic records seem distant to so many. Not because they're inaccessible, but because your mind was trained to reject anything that can't be proven by systems that keep you small. You were taught that truth comes from authority, knowledge is something to earn, and wisdom only counts if it's been peer-reviewed or institutionalized. But the soul doesn't work like that. Neither do the records. The truth is, you've already accessed the records. You just didn't call it that. Those moments of profound clarity that come from nowhere, the sense that you've known someone forever, the gut feeling that saved you, the flashes of insight in dreams, the déjà vu that made no sense, these are not glitches. They are fragments of the memory you were told to erase. But memory doesn't die. It waits. Beneath the noise of everyday programming, the soul still remembers. And no matter how much culture tries to silence it, it finds ways to speak through. Art, through synchronicity, through moments that force you to rebuild, through grief that cracks you open enough to feel something real. The forgetting was strong, but the remembering is stronger. The world never wanted you to know this, because someone who remembers is dangerous. They don't obey easily. They don't chase empty success. They see through the illusion, and worse, they help others see through it too. That's why mystics were burned, shamans silenced, and wisdom keepers erased. It wasn't about disbelief, it was about suppression. But the system is breaking. Cracks are forming in the foundation. More people are waking up from their amnesia, sensing something deeper. And once this process begins, it can't be reversed. Because once you begin to remember, you realize how much you've forgotten. And with every piece that returns, so does your power. You weren't meant to stay blind. You were meant to wake up. The Akashic records were never hidden. You were just taught not to look. But now you're looking, and that changes everything. Remembering is not about going back. It's about going within. The Akashic records aren't somewhere out there, in a distant dimension, guarded by mystics in flowing robes. They are right here, folded into your being, encoded in the stillness between your thoughts. Accessing them doesn't require rituals. It requires readiness. It's not about performance. It's about presence. You don't need special words, just honest questions. You don't need spiritual credentials. Just the courage to sit with yourself and listen beyond the noise. This is where most people hesitate. They expect thunder, visions, something dramatic. But the records rarely shout, they whisper. And that whisper sounds a lot like your own voice, only deeper, quieter, older. It arrives as a feeling, a flash, a sudden moment of clarity that comes when you least expect it and vanishes just as quickly. If you try to control it, you can't. You can only create the conditions for it to emerge. Stillness, sincerity, and space. You have to make room for what's been buried. That means tuning out the constant stimulation. It means choosing stillness, even when the world tells you to stay busy. Not because stillness is trendy, but because it's the only place where truth can surface. It's in the quiet that the soul speaks. And when it does, it might defy language. Start by sitting with questions, not for answers, but for contact. Ask not what should I do, but what do I need to remember? Ask about that fear that doesn't make sense, that relationship that feels unfinished, that pattern that keeps repeating. Don't rush, just ask, and then be willing to feel. Sometimes the answer comes immediately. Other times, it arrives later, through a dream, a song lyric, a conversation that feels too timely to be coincidence. That's the record speaking in disguise. Journaling might help. A stream of consciousness practice can open the door. Asterisk.